Hey, it's Carrie Joe.
Hey, it's Anna. Join us as we learn new things, challenge our assumptions, and grow as people. Welcome to the Heretical Hippies podcast.
In this season, we are going to explore the intersection of curiosity and wonder, and hopefully develop some fresh ways to see the world and ourselves. So come along for the ride, or don't. Either way, we're going to hit record. Hey, our favorite people. Anna and I are so excited to be back. Welcome back, Anna, from your travels and the conference.
Yay! Hello, everyone, and Carrie Joe.
So today I am going to interview Anna and ask her some questions so that we can all hear about her experience at a conference that she recently attended. And the keynote speaker was Eckhart Tolle. Don't come after me if I'm saying that wrong. We have several different sources that say his name is said in different ways. So whatever. He's the author of A New Earth. And what's the other book that he wrote that's really popular?
Now.
The Power of Now. That's right. We will put links to those in the show notes if you're interested. But I was telling Anna, I started the sentence and she's like, no, let's record. I literally skimmed the book A New Earth last night in preparation for this morning. And I was trying to come up with questions to ask her because I've not read the book yet. I will at some point. But I just wanted to get like a real tiny nutshell version of the things that Eckhart teaches and how it can impact our lives. So I think we're just going to jump right in, Anna, unless you have something else to add.
Yeah, no, let's do it.
Okay. So first of all, Anna, tell us about the conference. Where was it? How long was it? Were there any other side note speakers that you enjoyed? Just kind of give us a nutshell of the conference you experienced.
Yeah, so it wasn't a conference. It was more like a concert with Eckhart Tolle.
What?
Yeah, it was
I didn't know that.
No, it was just it was just literally we went to a conference center, and not really a conference center, more like a theater. It was a theater. And he spoke. There was a table or a chair on the stage, and he spoke for like a couple hours, and then he left. That was
Wow.
it.
So was he
Yeah,
being interviewed or he just got up there and started
he
speaking
just got up
wisdom?
there and talk. That's it. He just gets
Was
up there
there
and talk. There used to
audience
be
participation or no?
No, there used to be more audience participation. I don't think he does that anymore. Or at least not at. He's just gotten so big,
Mm-hmm.
like he's just so popular. It used to be where he used to, and the only reason I know that is because I've watched videos of YouTube of, talks where he has people that are allowed to go up to the mic and like ask questions and stuff like that. But I don't think that happens anymore,
Yeah.
especially too because of his age. He's like 70, I don't know. He was born in 48, so whatever that makes
Yeah,
him.
he old.
He's old.
He's probably too old
And
for that shit.
yeah,
Don't
right.
bother anymore.
I can see his, his age a little bit. But it does. I mean, he's still just as knowledgeable and wise as he's ever been, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, it was just a talk. I went with a few friends. My friend Deva, who we've interviewed on this podcast before, bought me a ticket, and she was like, "You need to get to Denver by March 23rd." And I was like, "Okay, I'm on it."
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, we had a blast. It was a lot of fun. I think one of the funnest parts was, you know, I've been to like a Buddhist sangha numerous times. My friends that took me to the speaking also have gone to a sangha before, and in those places and settings, you can be around other Zen interested people that also practice meditation and do it as a group as well, which is really cool. But to show up at this theater where there's, I don't know, thousands of people, like I don't know how many people were there, but it was a lot. And you kind of look around the room going, oh my gosh, they're interested in the same things I'm interested in. It's kind of like going to a concert in a way, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you like the same band I do. So
That's
that was a lot of
amazing.
fun. And it was, I think, particularly, kind of Eckhart's just another guy, but I really think, is bringing some wisdom to the world that is needed. And for someone who has admired him for a number of years and read all his work and watched too many videos and podcasts with him on them, it's just really neat to see him in person.
So I gave you questions, Anna. I'm probably going to jump around the page on
Go
them
for it.
just to be fair. But I'd love to hear, so you've been into him long before this speaking event. I would love to
Mhm.
hear, before this event, like, what was your favorite teaching or concept that you learned from
Mm.
Eckhart?
Mhm.
And yeah, anyway, I'll follow up on that. But I would love to hear, before the conference, what was your favorite teaching that he had?
I don't know if I can answer favorite, but I think
You can
that,
rephrase it
yeah,
for us.
most applicable thing that I attached myself to the most, I think, initially, was just presence. So coming out of Christianity, my friend Dava said, told me, you got to read A New Earth or Power of Now or whatever. And so I did, and I just wasn't ready for it.
Can you
It
explain that a
was
little
too
bit?
Yeah, it was too woo-woo sounding, Like, I literally just left religion, and it a little bit felt like I was stepping back into another religion. I see differently now, very differently, but I just wasn't ready. Also, too, Eckhart's teachings are kind of like Yoda,
Mm, a little bit
like,
cryptic.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd say cryptic, but just, you have to really listen. You have to be present and really listen and be willing to just dive into some of the concepts. And maybe I should say, add a little bit of faith. Like,
Mm.
there is a little bit of faith involved in some of the ideas.
I'd like to hear more about that, and we can come back around to it if it works better in
Yeah,
the conversation.
I think it'll reveal itself as we talk, for
Okay,
sure. Yeah.
super.
But after a while, some of his teachings in that initial reading kind of just stuck in my head, like phrases that kind of just kept coming back up in my mind after that, like after I walked away from it. So there was a point, and of course, after being friends with Deva for a while, and she kept coming back to some of the teachings and the phrases and the ideas, I was hooked back in and reread it. And the second time I read it, it was like a salvation experience, to be honest.
Really?
It is by far the closest thing that I've had to compare it in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, it was huge for me. Like, I remember reading the book and feeling like I'll never be the same again.
Wow, can
And
I ask, what specifically did you feel saved from, if you will, to use that phrase?
mostly just the idea of learning what the ego is.
Okay, that's perfect, because I wanna get into that as well. So, let's talk ego. Go there.
Yeah.
How would you
Yeah.
define it, and how do you feel like you personally encounter that regularly? It's gonna be different for everybody, I realize that, but we're here to hear your story.
Eckhart with ego. So it's basically, if I were to put it as simple as possible, it's your external identity, your outward form. But when I say external or outward form, I don't just mean like your physical, I also mean the mental construct that you have put together about who you are
Mhm.
and your external self, like the story, the narrative, what he calls the external I, or the external form. And I meaning, there's kind of like two people living inside of everybody, like there's the person, or the that you've defined
Sure,
for
the one that you
yourself.
project to the world, is that correct?
Sure, sure, that's part of it. I
Yeah.
think also to the one that you project to yourself.
Oh, interesting. That's also the ego?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like the person that's entangled into a narrative that you have for yourself. And so, what I came to the realization of when I told you I had that salvation type experience was recognizing what that was in myself, and then at least beginning to recognize what that was, or how it manifested in me, and then learning how to be present enough to be separate from the narrative and the identity, like the false identity. And it's not false in terms of the things about it aren't true necessarily, but it's the whatever I think is separate from everybody else. And Eckhart believes and teaches that God is like the sun, and that we're all not the sun, but I'm using this as an analogy, and we're all rays of light.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
So when we think that way, that means we're all connected, right?
Yeah.
That means we all have the source of life in us, the same source of life in us. And anytime we think that we're separate from other people, we lose that essence. We lose the connection with that essence. And so I realized that we're all just in varying degrees of awareness of our connectedness and the source that's in us. We're all just in varying degrees of that awareness. And so recognizing that you and I are the same, we're one.
Right.
It sounds really woo woo, right? And it is. I get it. I love it. It has drawn me to practicing presence, and that awareness has freed me in a way that I didn't know was possible when I do practice it.
That just has me dumbfounded. I mean, we could like end recording, leave people to sit with those thoughts. You're right. It is very profound stuff. And for me, as I listen to you talk about it, and I'm coming at this like very, very newbie, you know, I just skimmed a few paragraphs in the book and I'm hearing you talk about this. And just those things you've shared have elicited so many thoughts in response to what you've shared. So I can't wait. I'm a new groupie. I cannot wait to read this book. I got to get through my other book that I'm in right now because I'm notorious for not finishing books, but I am very excited about this. And also, I want to comment a little bit on what you were sharing about the analogy of the sun. Is that something, first of all, is it something he uses or is that your analogy?
He used it at the conference, actually.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, you know, I will say too, like you can read A New Earth, The Power of Now. You can watch any video of Eckhart. They're all basically the same.
Okay. A lot of overlap.
Yeah, there's so much overlap. So
at least he's consistent.
There's no like good or bad place to start with Eckhart's teachings.
That's really good to know. That's helpful. I love that analogy though, because of course we bring our experiences with us, right? The lens that we see things through, our past colors the lens. Clearly we're humans. And so when I hear that analogy of the source being the sun, and then we're all part of the source, the God source, that's so inclusive. Nobody's left out of that.
Right.
And I love that, especially coming from, you know, evangelical Christianity where there was, we're in, they're not, we have to convert them over to our side. It's like this constant battle between us versus them. And not to say that people who have been following Eckhart for years don't still have that binary thinking, because I think as humans, we naturally do try to categorize things. But I love the connectedness, the awareness that we are all in this boat together, whether you like them or not. This is how it is. I can't wait. I can't wait to dig more into that because it's like really inspiring to hear somebody talk like that.
So then I'll just dive right into the notes that I have.
Yeah, please do.
Notes at the talk. I want to read from about this particular subject because one of the things I think I've mentioned before in a previous podcast and also with you is that I've been researching Gnosticism lately.
Yes.
And then, you know, the biggest challenge that many of us have coming out of Christianity, and especially people that have come to atheism, have with God in general is the concept of suffering, right?
Right.
Everybody's, that is the thing. And so he touches on that. And I want to just share what he said. So this is Eckhart's words. I'm just going to repeat the notes that I took. Some of it may not be exact, but you get the point. So the ego identifies with concepts. And so a lot of times we hear things like especially in the atheist community, like truth claims or something, especially about spirituality, that a lot of atheists kind of veer away from. Absolute truths, right, about the world, about existence, are usually met with, you know, you have to be the bearer of the responsibility of proving that, which is almost impossible when it comes to spiritual things.
Yeah.
So I understand that there's an element here of faith, and this is where it comes in. So we ask the question, suffering, why would God allow it? And then we do come to the conclusion, whether a lot of people end up nihilistic, where everything is meaningless, right? Or random. Or we begin to think that maybe God is morally defective, which is where you end up with Gnosticism, like that he's actually a malevolent God. But he says that the starting point of the definition of God itself is a fallacy. God has been made into an entity in all these scenarios that we've mentioned. So God is not something you can imagine, the source of all life. All life emanates from this one transcendent source, not in space. He's not in space, or it's not in space and time. God does not exist at all or stand out. God is not a phenomenon in this world. God is a being transcendent to all space and time, emanating consciousness as the sun emanates light and life. You are awakening. You are the awakening universe. So that is the whole goal for Eckhart, is that he believes that we are an evolutionary process of humanity, and that awakening as a species is the next step for us in order to eventually experience world peace, really. I know, as cliche as that sounds, like that's really ultimately what he hopes and believes will happen.
That's amazing. Bring it on.
I know, right?
I'm ready.
So you are the awakening universe, not a person with a few little problems. Like, there's an actual consciousness that you can attain within your own self that connects with this life source that will bring like intelligence and creativity to how we do life. And
Can I ask a question about your
sure.
experience with that? So as I hear
Yeah.
you talking about, connecting with the source, that really feels warm and fuzzy to me, and I
Yeah.
can't wait to explore this a little bit more. But then on the
Yeah.
heels of that thought, I'm
Sure.
thinking, shit, I don't want this to feel like quiet time. I don't want this to feel like I'm praying to a being higher than me. So I'd love to hear like your thoughts on that, or your experiences with that. If it feels anything close to your Christian experience, or if it's you can completely disconnect from your Christian experience because this is so different.
Yeah, that has been a challenge to navigate through. As far as prayer goes, one of the cool things about that is it's been so identified within the Christian community to look a very specific way and sound a specific way. And when
Mhm.
you hear that word, you automatically think of it looking like that. And so for me, it's been a process of learning how to assign my own definition to prayer,
I love that.
and I'm still doing that. For a while, I spoke about it in a way that was more like, I'm going to just speak life into myself, into other people. I'm going to lay hands. I even use that term, have used that term, and I don't know why it's not as loaded as the word prayer, but laying hands on people just to speak life over them has been a practice of mine even since I left Christianity. And sometimes it's not so obvious. Like, it's a hug and saying beautiful things about someone straight to their face. Sometimes it's a card. Sometimes it's just by myself in my own meditation when I feel that narrative, that story of the past or fear of the future, or the identifying with what's happening to me rather than just being present. I will start to combat that with positive words of affirmation to myself, like breathing, practicing presence, but also speaking the things that I know are true over myself.
That's awesome. I love that shift from typical Christian prayer to how you now define prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Brian and I were talking a little bit. Actually, it's his Davis husband. He also went with us to Eckhart, and he was saying that he prays to people, like not in the same way that we think of praying, but more so just in the same way that I just described. Like, he's speaking life over them, but he's directing it to them specifically from across the world or the state or whatever. And it's like, okay, if you think of yourself as that we're all genuinely actually connected to one source, then you're really just, when you pray to other people, you're also praying to yourself.
Right.
And
And to the
when you
source. You're praying to
and to the rest of
yourself, the
this,
person, and the source
the
because
source,
it's
and
all
then
one.
everyone connected to
Oh
the
my
source
gosh.
too. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It really
So
is.
yeah, I love the idea. And this is where I say that faith comes in, because obviously we don't know, we
Right.
don't know.
I struggle with
But
that all the time.
yeah, nobody knows. Nobody knows jack shit when it comes to
Right.
what the definition of anything beyond this existence, right? But I find myself coming back to it time and time again because I feel like out of everything that I've read and seen and heard, it resonates with me the most, and it's so simple, really. Like a lot of what I'm learning feels complicated because it's having to weed through everything that I've learned in life,
Yeah.
and I'm having to unlearn at the same time. But it's so beautiful, and I lean towards receiving it as a beautiful, realistic way of life that I'm happy to walk out with this wisdom and applying it to my life because it doesn't hurt anybody. It's enlightening to me. I feel like it helps me so much get through the hard times. So yeah, it's been really good.
That's amazing. I want to springboard off of what you just mentioned, like going through tough times. We all
Mhm.
do from,
Mhm.
seasons, one season to the next. And you've shared a little bit about that on our podcast. I would love to hear, you kind of started to talk about suffering and how Eckhart addresses that. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And I'm curious, does it include the pain body?
Yeah, it
Because
has
that's
to.
another one of his terms that I noticed in the book, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." So if you
Yeah.
can, I'd love to hear about his concept of the pain body as defined by him, but then also as experienced by you, and how you're
Right.
using his teachings, I guess, to grapple with the tough times that you find yourself in.
Yeah. So the pain body is, that book, the body keeps the score. Most
Yes.
people that are listening to this may have heard that.
We'll put a link to that also.
Yeah. So essentially, in the same way that I described ego, it's that part of your ego that is the emotional part, is the pain body. So all of us kind of carry around a lot of pain. And in the simplest terms, that is your pain body. So I'm going to read a parable from Eckhart's book, The
Please
Newer.
do.
The inability, or rather unwillingness, of the human mind to let go of the past is beautifully illustrated in the story of two Zen monks, Tanzan and Aikido, who were walking along a country road that had become extremely muddy after a heavy rain. Near a village, they came upon a young woman who was trying to cross the road, but the mud was so deep it would have ruined the silk kimono she was wearing. Tanzan at once picked her up and carried her to the other side. The monks walked on in silence. 5 hours later, as they were approaching the lodging temple, Aikido couldn't restrain himself any longer. "Why did you carry that girl across the road?" he asks. "We monks are not supposed to do things like that." And then Tanzan says, "I put the girl down hours ago. Are you still carrying her?" Now imagine what life would be like for someone who lived like Aikido all the time, unable or unwilling to let go internally of situations, accumulating more and more stuff inside. And you get a sense of what life is like for the majority of people on our planet. What a heavy burden of the past they carry around with them in their minds. But memories in themselves are not the problem. In fact, it is through memory that we learn from the past and from past mistakes. It is only when memories, that is to say, thoughts about the past, take you over completely that they turn into a burden, turn problematic, and become part of your sense of self. Your personality, which is conditioned by the past, then becomes your prison. Your memories are invested with a sense of self, and your story becomes who you perceive yourself to be. This little me is an illusion that obscures your true identity as timeless and formless presence. So it distracts you from your timeless self that's interconnected with everyone else. You begin to think of yourself in terms of your pain. And the ego kind of loves that. The ego really likes it because it separates you,
Mm.
right? It makes you unique and gives you a little bit more of an identity. This happened to me.
So it's kind of like it gives you a sense of self-importance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the more drama, the more pain, the more the ego inflates because it gives you more identity.
That tracks. I have like people in my life that are floating through my head right now, and I'm thinking, yep, that
Mhm.
makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's easiest to see it in other people
sure.
because
And
we
that's
have a
probably my ego talking, which I have to,
yeah,
like the
yeah.
irony of that is like kind of funny.
No, it is because but that's natural. Like I do it all the time. I see it all the time. I see it in other people all the time. And I think that is totally normal. And here's the cool thing about it is like everybody has an ego. Nobody's different, right? So when you see it in other people, you're really seeing it in yourself, Like we talked about earlier, like everything's connected.
Yeah, it's a
So,
mirror for you
right,
if you're
in a
willing to look
way.
at it.
Sure. I mean, and the cool thing about ego is that it's not bad. Your ego isn't that's bad or good. It just is. It's like your nose or your arm or your ear. It's like, do you have an ego? Yeah. Just like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Is it
Again, I
bad?
love that. I'm
No.
like constantly comparing and contrasting, to my Christian
Hmm.
experience because that's all I know. And
Hmm.
I love that it doesn't label, it doesn't judge. It is what it is. And we all
Hmm.
have it. And we're not
Hmm.
like quantifying it or qualifying it as good or bad. It just is. That's so much
Hmm.
simpler and so much less condemning when it just is what it is.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
really
and I think
refreshing for me.
really what you're doing in recognizing your own ego is it's the beginning of freedom. Like Eckhart teaches that it's literally the beginning of awareness. And that's the teaching that I really latched on initially the most was in my own I was already practicing meditation and I felt like that without awareness it's hard to even meditate
Yes.
because you're so distracted by your thoughts. And so as soon as you are aware of your thoughts and you allow them to go through your mind or just allow them to be without trying to change them, sitting with them and allowing them just to be. That whole skill is the thing that I found myself recognizing my ego more and more in meditation. It's hard to recognize it when you're just doing regular life sometimes because you're distracted, you're in autopilot mode or whatever.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
then, but the more I meditated on it, the more I realized that I began to see it more and more outside of meditation. So meditating was really, really important for that awareness to increase. And that's what we're all doing. Now, when we, or any of us, I am you, you am I,
That's
is
right.
a
We're all
point.
one.
When I am frustrated with somebody in my life where, I'm like, I recognize their ego or I recognize, their pain body and I recognize this and I recognize that. It's like, man, they're just not aware. That's everything comes down to awareness. Awareness is life. Life is awareness.
Hmm.
That is something that I'm internalizing right now. I'm watching my granddaughter grow up and she's about a year and a half now. And, when she's born, she can't recognize who her parents are. She's just physically responding to sensations inside her body,
Mm-hmm.
right? But as she's grown, I've watched her increase in awareness all the time. She's aware of your phone. She's more aware of who certain people are. She's aware of her own ear. I remember when she first started pulling on her ear and I was like, oh, she's aware of her ear now, or
Yeah.
at least the sensation of her ear, right? And then I remember when she first started feeling her hair and it was like, oh my gosh, she's aware of her hair
That's
now.
so cute.
It was so fun. And I feel like that we're just big babies growing in awareness. So for me, it was like becoming aware of my ego was like becoming aware that I could walk.
Wow.
Like
That's powerful.
I have legs.
Right. I can go places.
I could go places and they work together. There's two of them and it's kind of like one leg is ego and the other one is consciousness.
Hmm.
Is the interconnected with with the source, right? And I'm trying to so the inner eye and the external eye, the outward eye is what Eckhart calls it. And it's like the external form or the external identity and the inner form and the inward identity, right? This is the inward identity, is that what I'm talking about, that taps into the source. And so one leg is like the ego and one leg is that, awareness. And they're just trying to work together one
Yeah.
at a time. They're
That's
working together to get
that's
places.
awesome. I'm sure at times it's clumsy and we trip on our faces, but we work it
Yeah,
out over time, just like a
right.
toddler.
Yeah. So I don't know, did I get off track? Pain
We were talking
body.
about pain body, but it
Yeah.
all works its way back
Yeah.
around. I think throughout the last 30 minutes or so, we've eventually answered the questions.
I know, right? Exactly. Okay, you asked in the questions that you sent me last night how I'm particularly struggling with or identifying with my own pain body right now, which is a loaded question.
It is. So feel free to take it in whatever direction you like.
Right. So coming back to the pain body, I'll do a full circle here. Like, last year has been one of the hardest of my life, probably the hardest. I mean, I did have Lyme disease one year and I couldn't walk and eat. That was really hard.
Oh my God.
I lost the ability to function and I had to go in 24-hour care and eventually had to learn how to walk again. And it was a crazy year. So to say that this last year compares to that in any way, shape, or form gives you a little bit of an idea.
Yeah, that's good context. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so I think the pain body identifies with the pain. It builds a narrative and an identity around the pain, right? It's natural for us to, when we have pain, we have thoughts associated with the pain. A lot of times you have thoughts first and then you have the pain, or you have the pain from something that's happened to you and then thoughts happen as a result of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thoughts that either come before or after the pain are usually loaded with labels.
Sure, judgment, narrative, making meaning
Right.
of something that may or may not be accurate.
Right. Yeah. Because our brains just want to make sense of everything. And because we are story-driven beings, we tend to build narratives around why this happened, what happened when, how can I justify my part in it, how can I blame the other person, or how can I make sense of why they did this? All of those things come into play. And then there's just labels all over the place. It's just you're putting it all together in a narrative in your head that is, has got to only be partially accurate. Even if you're really smart and you got a lot of information about the situation, even if you're entirely accurate, it's the identifying with it as who you are, and you're connected now to the story more than you are the source, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it also begins to reflect on you as a person. Like, you identify with it so much, so now that is your pain body. The pain is intertwined with that egoic narrative. And so then when things come up in life, or just you walk around with that baggage, all the time. And when that narrative is pricked in any way, the pain body shoots up, and all of a sudden you're reacting, you're lashing out, or you're crying, you're in a puddle of tears or whatever, because that narrative is just, it's you and the narrative are one. Oh, man, it's such a loaded question, because this last year I have been in the midst, I'm learning how to be a Zen Buddhist. At the same time, I'm being challenged in ways that I've never been challenged before, and sitting with the pain and not, I've vacillated the whole time. I've identified with it and built my own narrative, and then recognized that, and then come out of it. It's like a constant, I don't know if I'd say battle, but
It sounds like a cycle.
it is a cycle. It's the awareness is like it comes in waves more than it stays. Practicing awareness is like anything else. It's like a skill. And so the practicing, I was in the practice of meditation and practicing awareness before this bomb blew off in my life, so to speak. But I've never practiced awareness in such an intense time before. And so I was just really challenged to stay tapped into the source and to remain aware that the people that are in this narrative are just in varying degrees of awareness, and it's not personal.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful thought to come to. It kind of helps, I imagine, I shouldn't put words in your mouth. I imagine it helps you make sense of their behaviors or their choices and allows you to kind of let go to some degree of the pain that
Mhm.
it inflicts on you, which actually
Mhm.
brings me to a question I had about emotions. And I imagine, I mean, emotions are like very closely connected to pain or trauma,
Mhm.
right? We experience these difficult things, we have emotional responses. And I'm curious if Eckhart talks much about how to validate those emotions, because a lot of emotions that I experienced in Christianity would have been deemed sinful
Mm.
to dwell in them or to even acknowledge them, actually, to more just sweep them under the rug and you don't feel that way. That's not an option.
Mhm.
But it's clearly not part of the human experience to be able to do that. That's an inappropriate expectation. So I'd love to hear if there is a teaching on what to do with emotions when they come, and especially when they're attached to the pain body, because there's no way they can't be attached to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. I will say I don't have all of Eckhart's teachings memorized, but I
No,
will
that's
say,
fair. And it could just be how you experience it. And I like, given the
Mhm.
understandings you do have of Eckhart's teachings, I'd love
Sure.
to hear how you deal with those really tough emotions when they come when associated with the pain body.
Right. So, yeah. So, negative thoughts usually lead me to crying. When I think about what's been done to me or how I've been treated or things that have been thought about me and things like that, the negative stuff that people unconsciously do towards me, I get really sad. That's natural. That's a natural human emotion. It's an inherent part of me as a human, right? I think what Eckhart would teach and does teach is to not judge myself and to allow myself to have that emotion. And I think he leaves room for us to be human. Like and when I say I don't, these are not just Eckhart's teachings like we've talked about. This is a ancient teachings that Eckhart's kind of put together in a way that's being absorbed by this generation in a new way.
Yeah.
But it is Zen. It is a form of Buddhism, which is, we know, thousands of years old. So he encourages us to recognize them as signals of what's going on inside of us and
Hmm.
triggering us to be aware what's happening, right? Like allow yourself the emotion, but also allow yourself to pause and be aware of what's happening. What am I thinking right now? What? Just be present, allowing it to happen and flow through you in the same way you would when you're meditating and just having a regular thought, like I got to pay the bills and I'm not diminishing it. I don't think Eckhart would either, but just not identifying with it is the main goal. Having it, validating what's happening, but not sticking a label to it and holding on to it because that's when it becomes the pain body. Like emotions are not pain body. It's when we identify with the emotions as like our actual identity,
Yeah.
that it becomes the pain body.
I very much relate to what you just said. I become my emotional responses in a
Mm,
very unhealthy way. And
mm.
I've recognized that in the last probably year or two. So maybe I'll put this book on speed dial. I might have to just abandon my current book because honestly, yeah, it's tough. I'm a highly emotional person. I have really high highs and really low lows.
Yeah.
And I find that I do identify with them. And that doesn't help me. That doesn't serve me. And I try to like kind of bring myself out of that in some way, but I also don't have the tools to do it. So then I just get feeling frustrated that I can't, what is it, disidentify? What's the right word? To like detach. I can't detach myself
Hmm.
from feeling like I am that emotion in that moment. So I love it's like almost like you're saying, or he's saying, that we need to be an observer, which I guess is
Mm.
synonymous with awareness. Be an
Hmm.
observer of what you're experiencing, acknowledge it, identify it, don't identify with it, and then move forward, recognizing
Hmm.
what's happening and then grappling with it in the most healthy way, which I do not do. So I'm going to work on that.
So emotions, I know he says the emotions are an energy in your body. Like it's your body's response to a thought. And sometimes we have emotions and we don't realize what thought led us to that emotion, you know? Like it feels like we're just, especially as women with PMS, you
Oh
know,
my
it's
gosh.
like sometimes we're just mad and we don't know why,
Yeah.
you know? Like and we might just be like it might be one little thing like the kids didn't do the dishes and all of a sudden you're irrationally mad about it, right? It just not it's not proportionate to the
Right.
situation, right? And so but there's this energy in our body. There's it's obviously physiologically sometimes there are just things going on inside of us that we can't control. And so I think that's one benefit to increasing awareness is that we can begin to recognize when that energy is stirring in us and allow it to flow through us without reacting or like attaching to it in such a way that where we feel like we have to act on it because it is stimulating us, right? It's like allowing the energy to flow, but not jumping on a kayak and following it. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
like remaining here and now, not down the river on a kayak on the emotion of anger or whatever it is, ever emotion that you're having or whatever. That's a terrible analogy, but you get the idea.
No, I love it. In my own experiences, it makes me feel like if I approach things the way you just described, I would not become a victim to my emotions. That's almost
Mm.
what it feels like at times. Like the
Hmm.
emotions are slaying me on some level
Right.
because I haven't figured out the tools of how to just acknowledge it. Let it be what it is, acknowledge it, but don't let it define me in that
Hmm.
moment. So
Hmm.
it sounds like it's going to be a lifelong practice, which I assume you
It
would
is.
agree with. Yeah.
It is. I mean,
Man, it's really
it's so
interesting.
beautiful because I remember like David and I walked through. I've known her for 30 years. We walked through the last couple of years, especially since or a few years since I've deconstructed. We've walked together through that, and then through my process of increasing awareness, she's been practicing it longer than I have, and so she and I talk often because I'll be like, today I watched myself have an emotion and I did not react to it, you know? And she'd be like, "Yay!" you know,
Yeah, that's so
like
exciting.
cheering me on, like, "You did it." Or like, you know, "Today somebody cut me off in traffic and I did not flip them off."
Could really use that.
Really what awareness does is it reduces suffering. Like the problem of suffering, Eckhart believes, will be eliminated with increased awareness. Now, I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime.
No, that'll be generations down the road, if
It will
ever.
be many generations if it happens, right? But I love the idea. I want to participate in it. And even if all it does is reduce suffering in my own life, which we know ultimately will lead to it reducing suffering in other people's lives in my
Yeah,
life, right? Then it's worth it.
absolutely.
Even if it's all BS, it is worth it.
It is. I mean, it's like placebo effect. Even if it is BS, let's just call it a
Mhm.
placebo then. If it's
Right.
working, if you're becoming a better person, a more peaceful, kind person, everybody wins. Now that's
Yeah,
the kind of BS I can get into. If it
right.
is, right?
It leads to human well-being for
Yes.
sure. Yeah, it's useful and it leads to increased awareness and appreciation and intentional decisions, right? Not reacting to life, but responding to life. We need more of that across the board no matter what.
We
Whether it's
definitely
done
do.
within the confines of Zen Buddhism or something else, we need more of that 100%.
I agree. I love this conversation. I'm sure we could talk for hours beyond this, but we do have a hard out. So, wow, that's very Canadian of me. Every now and then Canada comes out of my mouth because I grew up in Michigan and there was like, yeah, it's just funny regionally. Okay, so let me come back to the topic at hand. You
Yeah.
talked a little bit about you and Deva going through your deconstruction journey together. And she has, what do I say, like mentored or at least encouraged you in your journey as well with Eckhart's teachings. I'd love
Sure.
to hear maybe one or two ways that his teachings have helped you or her, doesn't matter who experienced it, just things that you know of,
Mhm.
helped you to deal with your deconstruction because there's a lot of hurt and pain and processing that comes with deconstructing. So if you could wrap us up with how this is applicable to anyone listening who is deconstructed or deconstructing. I think we're probably all currently deconstructing for the rest of our lives, but yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of times with, actually have a little section, another section in A New Earth that I want to read as when I thought of that question, that I wanted to draw from. Whenever tragic loss occurs, you either resist or you yield. Some people become bitter, deeply resentful. Others become compassionate, wise, and loving. Yielding means inner acceptance of what is. You're open to life. Resistance is an inner contraction, a hardening of the shell of the ego. You're closed. Whatever action you take in a state of inner resistance, which we could also call negativity, will create more outer resistance, and the universe will not be on your side. Life will not be helpful. If the shutters are closed, the sunlight cannot come in. When you yield internally, when you surrender, a new dimension of consciousness opens up. If action is possible or necessary, your action will be in alignment with the whole and supported by creative intelligence, the unconditioned consciousness, which is in a state of inner openness you become one with. Circumstances and people then become helpful, cooperative. Coincidences happen. If no action is possible, you rest in the peace and inner stillness that comes with surrender. You rest in God. Eckhart uses that word God too, which is interesting because he's really just talking about the source that we talked about earlier. When I read that, I think to myself, a lot of people that are deconstructing are finding themselves frustrated with lost time or harm or hurt that has been done to them in the process that they are just now recognizing, or even just terrible ideas that they've held on to for too long. And it feels like I've been deceived. And there can be a lot of anger and just negative emotions that come with that. And when I began to see my journey as a Christian as just a step in the process of me becoming more and more aware and enlightened, so to speak, I saw it more like graduating from high school than I saw it as a distraction for 20 or 30 years. Like it was a necessary step. Like I was born in a time, in a family, in a place that it was inevitable for me to be a Christian. And it was almost like I don't have free will. And thankfully, I'm also born in a time where I get to learn about truth and also learn about Eckhart, just increase into my own personal awareness of the world around me. And I don't think I would have had that, at least not to this degree, had I been born in a different time and place, you know? And so I'm more so looking at life and even my journey as a Christian as like a roller coaster. The roller coaster is not always the descent, which is the fun part, right? The free fall is the part where you get to let go, raise your hands and scream, you know, and say, yay, this is so fun. It's also the part of where you're slowly inching
click,
to the
click,
top.
click, click.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's also the waiting. It's also the, I don't know. It's just
the person in front of you throwing up.
Yeah, sure.
All the
Yeah.
things.
Or yeah, the person beside you, you know, holding your hand. And it's also so many things. It's not the best analogy, but you get the idea. It's definitely life for everyone is kind of in a way like you've watched The Truman Show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like I think of that, me and Ricky talk about that movie a lot. It's like, you know, you're Truman. You were born in a bubble and you kind of just accepted it because it worked for the time, right? But then at some point, Truman's starting to see the inconsistencies, and the little glitches here and there. And he starts questioning. And then he starts taking chances. And then he pushes the limits and eventually finds the edge. And he has a choice. He gets to walk out or stay. And he's given a choice. And he decides to walk out, knowing that he's stepping out into the unknown. And I love that analogy. I think that movie in general applies to deconstruction in so many ways. And so, yeah, I'm not bitter about my Christianity, my time in Christianity, because it served me in some ways. That's why I stayed in it for so long. I don't want my story to be just about the things that I lost in that time, the things that shouldn't have happened in that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about earlier, like I want to move forward with freedom from attaching my identity to the negative parts of that. Recognizing the negative is one thing. Calling it out, totally something worth doing. Attaching myself to it and carrying it around as my pain body is not going to serve me. That's one of
a beautiful thought. That's a great way to close it up, honestly. I feel like you were talking right to me. I have some self-reflection to do. That's amazing. Anna, thank you. Thank you so much for being thoughtful about the questions I sent you, even after merely skimming the book. It was a great conversation, and I hope, like our audience, very inspired to read this book. And I'm going to go very slowly through it because just the things you shared had my brain kind of twisting up in knots at times. It's a lot of really profound thoughts and concepts all rolled into a book. And I think that's a thing to maybe encourage our readers as well, or our listeners, if they become readers of Eckhart or consumers on some level. Give yourself time. Don't expect to understand it all. I mean, that's boring to understand it all in one fell swoop. So just like anything, give yourself time, be kind to yourself, and apply what makes sense to you in this very moment of your life. So do you have anything else you want to say before we totally wrap it up?
No, I agree with that idea to just take it in nuggets, especially if it's something, it all sounds so new. And, just take it in nuggets, little pieces. I mean, you can find Eckhart's teachings online all day long. YouTube has thousands of hours of Eckhart. And even if you don't want to spend the money on a book or whatever right now, you can even just listen to him talk. It's all the same content.
And I follow him on Instagram, and he often will have, I'm sure he's not managing the account, but often there's just a quote from him posted, and it is thought-provoking in itself. Just one little line of basically challenging the status quo of how we operate in our daily lives. So I find that to be helpful. And that's like a really tiny bite-sized way to consume his content.
Sure.
So
there are other really great Zen Buddhist teachers too, Pema Chodron and Thich Nhat Hanh, and there's a lot of really great people out there that have other content as well. And maybe we could do podcasts on them as well.
Yeah, that's a great thing to consider for sure. I'm open to it. All right. Well, it's been real. We love you guys. Thanks for listening if you got this far. And we're going to sign off. Do you want to sign off differently? Do it. Do it again. Sorry, do it.
Peace out, my friends.
And I'm going to stick with peace out. Hey, if you made it this far, damn, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for listening to us, and let us know who you are. We want to hear from your sweet little face. Check back in for the next episode to experience more hippie nonsense, talk more heresy, and share more laughs.